It was pouring down raining that night. Kent County Sheriff's Office was called by a homeowner in reference to a person that had been injured. They interviewed a male party by the name of Ryan Holness and discovered a deceased female lying in a field. She had over 25 or 30 cutting and stabbing wounds. Kent County Sheriff's Office doesn't have a large criminal investigation division, so they called the state police, and the homicide unit was assigned to the investigation. This picture right here this is the scene as we found it. So this altercation occurred in this general area on both sides of the road. You can see it's very muddy, but the car was parked in this general area. You can see the tire tracks. He told us that he was with his wife, Sarika Dunkley, who was the deceased in this case. Mr. Holness reported that he was carjacked. We'll call him the unknown carjacker, chased after her, tackled her, and then there was an altercation in the field where he ended up stabbing Miss Dunkley to death. So that was Mr. Holness's story. I interviewed him while investigators were out processing the scene. He provided a lot of information, a lot of detailed information about what happened, but his story just really didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Formed the homicide unit in late '97, early 1998 under Colonel David Mitchell. Colonel Mitchell wanted a centralized unit that only specialized in homicides, police-involved shootings, and criminal cases on police officers to be a statewide unit, and that's why the unit was formed. The build-up for the homicide unit, I mean, we had basically 24 hours, maybe 36 hours from the time the colonel made the decision till we were implemented. Each barrack before then would handle their own homicide cases. So then we started the process of interviewing state trooper detectives, investigators, and putting together a homicide unit. And we were told to pick the best investigators that we could find in the state police. When I left, I was the longest serving homicide investigator in the history of the state. It took us nearly a year to get the manpower and womanpower that we needed in the unit to effectively handle all the cases. And as we became more and more successful, other police departments would ask us to handle all of their homicides.
We are regionalized, the homicide unit is, into essentially 4 regions. We have a lieutenant on the Eastern Shore, and that covers the east and the south of the region of Maryland, and then another lieutenant that covers the north and western areas. And we also have D sergeants that are active case managers in all the different regions. And within those regions, you're going to have a number of investigators. It just depends on that region. Greg Collins was a Marine Corps veteran. He was a Eastern Correctional Institute corrections officer. After his shift, as he was driving home, he was fatally shot. This photograph here is of Greg's 1990 Toyota Tacoma. You notice the back windshield is, the glass is broke out. One of the rounds that ultimately ended Greg's life went through the driver's side headrest and into the back of his head. As the investigation went on in early 2001, the case eventually became cold. The investigators back then did a great job interviewing numerous individuals. Hundreds of hours of investigation went into this case. The digital recorder was the primary source of evidence gathering that we used. In the early days, it was customary for a witness or an informant to be wired up. The issues with those were the transmitter would have to be close to where the listening post is or where the officers are listening to the conversations. And oftentimes that audio was distorted, or if there was any background noise, you would not be able to hear what the conversation was going on. So these digital recorders are great in the fact that you can also edit them using technology. You can get some of that distortion out of the conversation.
So this is very high tech, so it has to like do its thing. I am a firearms examiner. Basically, my job entails of the firearms identification. So determining if any projectile, such as bullets, cartridge cases, shot shell components, have been fired from a particular firearm. Every day is very different. There's nothing that is consistent day to day. The bread and butter of this unit is the comparison microscope, where you can look at two different items under the same magnification and you can manipulate the items individually. So for instance, this is a good example. These two items here are consistent with being a Glock. Both of these have an elliptical firing pin. So you have all this breech area right here that agrees with each other. This is a kind of simple case. So if you have a firearm that was recovered at the house, you have a cartridge case from the scene, a cartridge case at the house, correct? So you have 3 pieces of evidence. What we would do if we was to get this case, we would test fire the firearm, do the comparison of the test fires and say that these 2 test fires have reproducible marks. Then you can do the comparison of the evidence that was found at the house and found at the crime scene. Basically all this says is that the cartridge case at the scene, the cartridge case at the home have been fired from the firearm that was recovered. The core discipline of firearms identification has remained pretty much unchanged for almost a century. The technology has improved, so the imaging, the software, that has improved. But the whole method of comparing this item to this item essentially has gone unchanged this entire time.
In the homicide unit, we've been fortunate enough that we've had colonels in the past and the future colonel that believe in the unit and the experience we have as investigators. The average investigator in the unit has probably 10 years investigative experience. I think a lot of agencies just view us as a traffic agency, and we're so much more than that, to where we're a full service law enforcement agency. And I think with this new partnership with the Attorney General's office and us going and investigating these fatal police involved shootings, these other agencies are seeing how diverse, how experienced our investigators are.
Should we leave that in here or just put Corporal Scott Sears as the lead investigator?
Our cases have increased. We also gained some new responsibility of handling fatal police involved shootings for every agency in the state. And that's when we had to increase the size of the homicide unit. We went from roughly 9 to 10 investigators and doubled to almost 20 investigators. As a supervisor, I couldn't do it without the investigators that we have in this unit, and I think the unit couldn't have survived with the quality investigators over the years.
Well, I'm very proud to have been a part of it because I met and worked with, and still you have the best investigators in the state of Maryland, some of the finest people you ever meet in your life. I work shoulder to shoulder with, and that tradition continues with the current homicide unit.
In the days of CSI and TV show CSI, the juries want to see physical evidence. And I think these guys can tell you, we don't get that in every case. No investigator likes to have an open case on their resume, right? Between the time we had convicted the husband and found the second person involved, we still, I was ecstatic, I could just say the least. When I got that call from the crime lab, I was very happy because now we had 100% closure of the case. And we could tell the family that, hey, we've got everybody involved.
We have the best and brightest in the unit right now as far as they're keeping up with all the technology. They don't do it for the recognition. They don't do it for any accolades. It's a thankless job. They do it for the victim and speak for the victim.
So when do you guys get to shine?
We shine amongst ourselves when we go and get to make an arrest in a case.